I just went on the live thing, so if you don't mind, you can stay on the phone with me. Just as a,
Sure, of course.
yeah. What's up, Billy? I'm talking to an attorney that is representing some inmates out of Texas prison.
Oh, I'm actually an advocate.
Oh, you're an advocate. I'm sorry. Well, I'm talking to an
Yeah.
advocate,
I'm
and
linked up with the attorneys.
okay.
Yeah.
You want to introduce yourself? What's your name and all that stuff?
Sure. My name's Brittany. I've been involved in this since October of 2020. Just kind of learning about the system in Texas in restrictive housing and then trying to alter it, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah. Today, like it's not my today. You know, welcome to my live video for your viewers. Like we have a special today. I've been communicating with some inmates out of the Texas prison system, and for the first time in its history, these inmates are tired of like the atrocity that's been happening to them, and they've organized a hunger strike, which I believe. Well, I thought it was tomorrow, and you said it was supposed to be on the 10th. Brittany?
Yes, sir. The 10th is the same day that the legislative session, the 88th legislative session for the state of Texas starts. So the idea is they wanted them to go into session with them on their minds, with their names on their minds and the issues.
Yeah, so, today we're here just to bring attention to what's going on out there in the correctional facility out in Texas. I have a friend that's been there. He did 24 years with me in the federal system and was extradited to the state. He's been there since July of 2021 and has only been out of his cell 4 times for an hour each time. Over there, they're always having an excuse not to give you rec. And just the other week, maybe just last week, there was an incident down there where this guard has been mistreating this inmate, and the inmate somehow got out of his cell at night and beat the crap out of the guard. But, these things that go on, I've been in prison myself, as you guys know, that we're not out there to try to be any type of trouble or anything. We're trying to do our time. We're trying to cope with the time that we have. But there's only so much things that we can take as far as the mistreatment of us. Like at the end of the day, we're still men. We're still human beings. There's still women that, yeah, we made some mistakes. But the extent of the mistreatment that happens to these inmates, especially down there in this Texas prison, is inhumane. And today we're just trying to bring attention to that. And for all those viewers that want to support the cause, man, contact your, representative and let them know that this stuff is not acceptable, that we're treating our fellow human beings the way that we are treating them. And I have here with me Brittany. She's an advocate for these individuals, and she can elaborate a little more than I can on what's been going on with, the conversation for this thing right here. So, if you can, yeah.
We submitted a restrictive housing proposal to the State House representatives, to Greg Abbott, and the Senate. And it was in October. We gave them a 90-day notice to remedy before we escalated. And the fact that nobody even bothered to reach back out to find out what that meant shows me that their lack of concern for what happens within the system exists only up until it's an embarrassment for them. And the thing behind that is we have 14 units involved in the event, and they decided to go ahead and scramble and try to communicate with everybody they think or thought was involved in the strike. But what they ended up doing was going and helping to circulate the information, which is against their own policy. But the reason they're doing this is because they sit there, for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. One of the guys on my mailing list has been in solitary confinement for 27 years. And they watch people get carried out in bags. They watch people self-medicate and then suffer the consequences of it. And lately, a lot of the wings haven't even had an officer assigned to the pods. So if there's an issue, they have to bang loud enough for the picket to hear them. And because they don't have an officer in the pod, that means that picket officer is carrying both sets of keys, which is a huge security violation. But of course it's not a concern, or of course it's acceptable until it's an embarrassment. But Cofield unit, for instance, they went an entire year when we first got involved in this without rec. They didn't go to outside rec at all. And I don't think people understand the effects on the human psyche when you are denied the natural things that we require to exist, right? We need water, we need air, we need sunlight. And not only that, but they're also deteriorating their personal relationships. They make the mail hard. They make, the visits more difficult. You don't get the phone calls. The men went on hunger strike on Allred previously, and one of the things that came of it was a 5-minute call. However, a lot of the people that were involved ended up getting moved to a unit that doesn't allow 5-minute calls. So the idea that they had behind this was to unify all the units so that they couldn't move them, and if they did, it would only propel it forward. But the issues with medical is one of the worst I've ever seen. I had a gentleman who had an excessive use of force performed on him, and they tore his MCL and his ACL, and it took him 6 months to see a doctor. And that gentleman's actually a UFC fighter out in the free world, and he's due to be released in a year, and now he's not even sure he can work. They don't understand how we're mistreating them affects them in the future. And the argument that people always seem to make, they did the crime, they should do the time. The judge doesn't sentence people to solitary confinement. They have no authority to do so. That is within the warden's power and the administration's power. So when that person's sitting on your jury, or when that judge makes that decision, they don't understand that a lot of people are going to come out worse because they're struggling with the effects and coping in the real world. And, the recidivism rate is huge. The short of staff, we're staffing at a low percentage of what it should be. And anytime there is an embarrassment to the institution, it becomes more restrictive. So, for instance, the latest big escape that they had that resulted in the tragic loss of 5 lives, their resolution to prevent that was to take away their boots. And part of the reason they had to do that is because they're short of staff. So I don't know where the taxpayers get the idea that it's easier to remove boots that everybody's family's already paid for than it is to look down as a CO when somebody's boarding the transport bus and say, you can't wear shoes, you can't wear those boots on the bus. It's easier to take the boots of 3,000 men than to look down at the few that are getting on the bus and say, you can't wear those, throw those under the bus. I don't understand how that makes sense, or how the Texas taxpayers have been so accepting and allowing this to continue, and then questioning why their crime rates are going up and why the incarceration rate's going up, and why there's no COs that want to work the job. But the COs are working in buildings that aren't air conditioned, and they're wearing the padding and all the gear that they have to wear, and they're suffering too. We've got employees who are veteran employees that are ready to walk off, and sadly these are the employees who treat the men with respect and dignity, and they understand that they are human and they do have an out date, the majority of them, because 80% of them are going to get back out. And we have to question what we're doing in that time before their release, and asking ourselves, are we really making them better? Or are we just prolonging their agony and ours until the day they're released, and then we get to act surprised when they reoffend?
Yeah, part of my program here, speaking to the viewers, is I'm trying to share with the public that just because we've been in prison doesn't mean we're all piece of shit. We're human beings. And most people that are in prison, I don't want to blame the environment or the conditions that we grew up with, but there's no way that you can just ignore that. And a lot of these things are, these individuals are trying to find ways to feed their family and themselves within the resources that they know how. And yeah, we might not agree with them or anything. And whatever, they get caught for the crime, they go to do their time. But we've already had our freedom stripped from us already. And not just our freedom, but our dignity. There's no modesty. There's anything. Anytime a CEO wants to come and tell him he want to strip us down, we got to take off our clothes without, any objection. We can't. You have no rights. You no longer have a voice. You can't buck, for lack of a better term, anything that these CEOs want to do. So if they want to strip you out, tell you lift up your armpit, pull up your nutsack, bend over and spread your butt cheeks, you have to. Even if they know that you don't have anything going on, that it might be breaking any of their rules, but because they have the authority to tell you to do these things, they can. And you get, I don't want to paint a broad brush to all the correctional officers that work in these facilities, but there is enough of them that I get so adamant about when I speak about these things that they get a kick out of this shit because they have the authority over you, because they always hold the threat that if you assault them, if you put your hands on them, they're just going to give you new cases. So, their courage is really on loan by the federal government. And, and when it goes to the court, when they get beat up, when they get stabbed up, when they get killed, or whatever it is that happens to these staff, when it gets to court, you're always going to hear, oh, this officer was just doing his job. They don't tell you all the crud ball shit that they've done in the meantime, in between time, until it got to a breaking point for this particular inmate to cause him to do this shit. And right now, the homies out there in Texas, think about this. I want the public to think about this. You're in a cell smaller than the bathroom at your house. Go walk into your bathroom right now. Sit on your freaking toilet and just envision and imagine yourself sitting on that toilet for 2 years. Let's just say 2 years, because there's people that's been in those cells for decades. Let's just say 2 years. You're sitting there for 2 years without ever getting out of this cell to walk around to get fresh air. My friend, which I'm not going to mention his name because I don't want to, get him caught up over there. He's been in this Texas prison for 2 years and has been out of his cell 4 times for rec. Every time they're supposed to call rec. Yeah. Go ahead.
The only things that are allowed to come and go are the rats, the mice, and the roaches. Everybody else is stuck in their cell. And I think people, the best way to relate it to the public is to go back to the beginning of COVID. We were locked down. We were told what to wear, how many of something we could buy, whether we could or couldn't wear what we wanted into a store. And everybody, I think, nowadays understands a bit more how that affected them when they lost a family member that they weren't able to say goodbye to or to comfort or, to be there for the birthday parties and the holidays. What America, what Texas needs to do is to look back on COVID and remember that they were in a cell of their own, but they were at home with their creature comforts, and they were able to walk outside if they wanted to, and we still suffered from anxiety, depression, heightened suicide rates, and the self-medicating, and now, because prices are up high, the crime rate's going up. And it should all make sense to everybody who pays taxes as to how that affected them. Yes, they did the crime, but nowhere in that crime said it needed to involve inhumane treatment or suffering. And I honestly think, if people would look back at COVID as they're sitting in their bathroom, and just understand that, you don't have a say in when your food comes, if it's hot or if it's cold. You don't get your multi-outlet because, somebody on Tune decided to start a cell fire, so no multi-outlets. It's ridiculous, and they're so concerned about the drug problem in the prisons, but what everybody forgot about in Texas is that they didn't allow visits for a whole year. So, I mean, tell me how those drugs got in. You know what I mean? Like, them COs who are doing such a great job and deserving of that pay raise are the same people who are sneaking stuff in, and there's been a couple of them that have been outed in news articles. But one thing that I find a bit odd is the press's unwillingness to expose the prison system. You know, if somebody is a gang member and they're involved in a crime, their local newspaper, their face is spread across the newspaper, and that the title of the gang that they're in is in the newspaper, and it's smeared in the mud. But when it comes to the report about the TDCJ and how only the staff helped perpetuate the escape and the murder of that family by not doing their protocol because they were too busy and they're so short of staff, but they don't understand that it's the taxpayers' unwillingness to know about what's going on that is making their community unsafe.
Well, ignorant, it's always ignorant is bliss. Like for any viewers that are just joining me right now, I know usually we just go back and forth and answer questions from the viewer, but today there's an organized laydown that's being orchestrated out there in the Texas prison to protest the atrocity that these inmates are suffering, and their gripes are justified. They're not asking for jacuzzi tubs or whatever it is that you think that we don't deserve or anything. They're asking to be treated with dignity, to be able to take a shower once or twice a week. They're going on weeks and weeks without shower because one, the correctional prison in particular are short of staff. So they're not letting the inmates shower on a regular basis, and they're not letting them get out of their cells to rec on a regular basis. Like, again, I say, like, no matter how you feel about these individuals that are incarcerated, they're still men. They're human beings, and at the very least, you should be able to be treated with some type of dignity. Because, man, I just, I don't have the words to articulate my feelings when it comes to this subject because I've experienced it personally firsthand. And
yeah.
So, I've been in that cell.
Your opinion is a biased opinion, but it's an opinion that people need to hear because it's not having that biased opinion that has allowed this to continue for so long. And, that's the thing. We're not asking for a release. We're not asking, none of these men have told me they're innocent. Nobody is trying to BS their way with me. And I think that's how we manage to gain so much respect with all the groups involved is because I refuse to judge them because they've already been sentenced for that crime. They were judged. That's not my place. My place now is to make sure that what's being done in the prison system is being done correctly. The policies and procedure violations that are occurring, for instance, the SCC hearings that they go to, how those go down in the state prison is the incarcerated individual walks into a room full of like 7 or 8 people. He sits down, they say, "Are you a gang member?" He says, "Yes." Say, "Do you want to go to the grad program?" He says, "No." Say, "All right, well, you're getting a set off. Thank you." I had one individual go in, he had a statement prepared and everything. And he went through, they wouldn't let him finish his statement. And he handed it to them, so they put it in his file. They didn't mark down that a statement was submitted on the hearing. They get a sheet of paper during the SCC hearings or after it. And he noticed that the decision date, the line it's signed on, was signed a day before the hearing.
Yeah.
So if that explains the lack of due process or the lack of anybody's willingness to hear these men and how they feel and what they want to do with their time while they're there. If you're in restrictive housing, you don't get programming unless you go to grad, which is the gang associate, the debriefing process. So a lot of the guys refer to it as snitch school. And unless you're willing to do that, you don't get religious programming, you don't get education, you don't get vocational skills. And I find it so odd that a lot of these people are in the prison for drug-related charges, nonviolent, and they think that A lot of people self-medicate with drugs because of childhood trauma. A lot of these men have seen their parents, one parent abuse the other, one parent suffer drug use in some cases too. So they've been trying to work through that trauma on their own, and obviously because they're incarcerated, it's not gone so well on doing it on their own. So where Texas gets the idea that if you just segregate them and isolate them, that it's going to make it better, it's completely asinine.
Yeah, it's like they haven't even committed any infraction before they even get put in those ad seg. You come in, they deem you a gang member, and they lock you up. And that's it. They're not giving you an opportunity to program. They're not giving you an opportunity to better yourself. You're just, like you said, the papers were signed the day before he went in there. So regardless what he had to say, regardless if he had any points to make, they've already made up their mind. They've already judged you. And that's not how the system's supposed to work.
Yeah, and there's no independent oversight in Texas. And if I could ask one thing of the parole board, it would be tasked these gentlemen during their hearings if any of their charges was gang related, any of them. And if they reply no, and if it's able to be proven that in fact in their file there's nowhere saying that gang involvement was directly linked to their crime, they should not be denied parole. Because you've already segregated this person based on an assumption. And the thing about the confirmation process is they are able to confirm people based on evidence that even those people aren't allowed to see. So in the case in California that we're basing our lawsuit off of, one of the guys was confirmed because he had a book from the library, and in that book there was other names. They didn't bother to match his handwriting to see if he in fact wrote any of the names or anything. They just confirmed him, and 23 years later he's still there. Over a book, and they want you to go to grad, they want you to debrief, but they have no proof you have anything to debrief. I mean, in Texas we got guys segregated under the wrong gang. So I mean their thoroughness and their investigations are a farce. And when you put in the public information requests and you say, well, how many convictions resulted from the grad process and the information disclosed, you're not allowed to know that. You're not allowed to know what they ask of you in the grad process. I got my hands on it anyway, but you're not allowed to know. And if anybody needs to hear the numbers to have it click in their head, there was 61 suicides in Texas prisons last year. 4 years prior, it was only half that, and this year we were already up in the 40s, and that was in September. So I think it's going to be higher this year, but these people are going around Darrington Unit, for example. They're going around and writing "Know Your Worth" on the wall and painting this nice, beautiful mural. But when you treat somebody like they're not worth anything, and they have no control, no say over their own rehabilitation because they refuse to go into that program. But that program, the grad program, has a $5 million budget, and only 53 people participated. So my question is, where's that $5 million? If it's not going back into the community, if it's not going into making anybody else better, and if their enrollment for the grad program is so low compared to other years, why aren't they saying instead of grad, anybody who gets their GED that doesn't have it, we'll put that in your folder. Why is grad mandatory but education isn't? Why is grad mandatory but religious, stuff isn't? And all the different religions within the TDCJ, they normally only recognize, the Catholics or Christians. So if you, for instance, are an Indigenous American and you want to exercise your religious freedoms in the institution, for lack of a better word, you're shit out of luck, because they don't know anything about your religion. They're not familiar with your culture. They're not familiar with what you need in order to practice, but they are so quick to tell you, no, that's not your religion. No, you don't need that, to the point where you can't even pray to your God
Yeah.
for comfort, or it's insane to me on the amount of things that we do to these people, and then we question why they keep returning.
Yeah.
I don't ground my child before she does something wrong, because she might. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's and that's basically what ADSEG is. In their own policy, it says for a possible future threat.
There's
nothing saying that individual is a threat already.
Yeah, they just it gives them such a broad authority over the population. I have a couple comments on here that, my homie Billy Leon from Provo, Utah was asking earlier, how is it possible that the prisons, that these people in Texas are organizing a food strike because of the beef and the war between all these different gangs, and through our history. I've been in prison a long time. I did 23 years and 8 months to be exact. And there was times when we try to organize a group demonstration, whether it's a food strike or just a lay down where we don't come in or come out of our cell. And a lot of times, like, when I was in Victorville, I shut the prison down. Me and my cellie, Kojo, he was the head security for the Muslim community. Me and him were cellies. And between the two of us, we organized a lay down and got all the gangs in Victorville USP to lay it down. But but a lot of times it doesn't work because of the war that goes, because of the racial tensions between the blacks, the whites, the Mexicans, the rivalries between these different gangs, whatever excuses that these inmates want to give themselves not to cooperate with each other. But it's gotten so bad in a Texas prison that these gang members, these gang leaders are coming to realize that, hey, we are not the enemy. We don't hold the keys. I'm not the one keeping you locked up. I'm not the one that's denying you food. I'm not the one that's denying you recreation. It's these motherfuckers with the uniform. It's these motherfuckers that are in the administration, sector or whatever it is. It's these people and not us inmates amongst each other. And finally, the condition in Texas has gotten so bad that they woke up. And, I just got a phone call a couple days ago from an individual that was in there that I communicate with, that I'm, real close friends with. They pulled him and a few other people, and they put him in a rec cage to try to interrogate him about the upcoming food strike. And, when they came back, the guards came away in there and fucked up their cell, threw all their shit around, just made a mess of all their shit, took their stuff in retaliation. Retaliation for what? For a peaceful protest, just to let you guys know.
First Amendment right.
Yeah. We have a right to peacefully protest, whether we're on the streets or incarcerated. But
well, yeah, that's the thing is, a lot of these gangs involved in the 70s, 80s, and 90s as a form of protection for themselves. So, and back then, other gangs were more of a danger, but Texas prisons have deteriorated to the point where most of the groups, especially the older groups that did start in the 80s, are looking around now, and they're understanding that the prison conditions are their biggest threat. And until you fix those, nobody is going to be getting any better. And just the fact, so what the case that we're basing everything off of is the Ashker case, which you can find on the Center for Constitutional Rights. But when you go into it, it's got a timeline, and simply all we had to do is organize was to make sure everybody knew about the Ashker case. And all these groups see that the old way of doing stuff and not working together in some aspects is what also helped perpetuate this, because they were each other's enemy, and now they all see that they have a very common one. And the thing about this is, if the wardens across the system were more willing to work with what we are doing, it could be a benefit to them, because you have men who have lived in those conditions for 20 years who are willing to say, Yeah, we could totally do group rec, 2 to 3 person group rec. I'm feeling comfortable with working with him, and him. But if I don't, I'll sign this paper telling you to take me off the list. But before that, I'll sign a release form saying, I understand I am choosing to rec with this individual and putting myself at risk. If the wardens would understand that allowing 2 to 3 person group rec would help ease the strain on staff shortages, because it takes you 1/3 of the time to run rec and the walk alone status to showers. These men are supposed to be behind locked doors. It's supposed to be a secure unit. Then tell me why they can't take themselves to the shower.
Yeah, and the thing is,
we're walking. Yeah. Nobody else is on the run. What's the problem? What are you so worried about? You know what I mean?
But this is part of their job. Like, the inmates are in there against their will. Like, literally, we can't leave when we want to. But these staff members, these correctional officers, these counselors, these case managers, these unit managers, all these people that work in these facilities, they signed up for this. They signed up to work in those facilities, and part of their job description is getting people out to rec. Part of their job description is getting people out to shower. But they don't, when they get there to the job, they just feel like, well, if they don't want to do it today, we're not going to do it. And what can we do but bang on ourselves? Like, we have a commenter, James Keller. He says, we have our own laws in Texas. It's a different breed down here. Okay, but what the fuck does that mean? So the people in Texas the inmates in Texas aren't human beings no more? I mean, why do we keep giving these people excuses to mistreat men and women that's incarcerated? And why do we as a public don't care enough about it to say something about it?
I mean, yes, Texas is a different breed, but let's not forget the stuff that came across the news having to deal with the Texas prison systems this year. The MTC contractor, for instance, that's supposed to provide programming, they started transitioning to paper packets at the beginning of COVID, and nobody bothered to ask why they didn't transition back. So Texas taxpayers have been paying money for the incarcerated individuals to attend this programming in person and to hear the lectures and to get the group, I don't want to say therapy because everybody's so against mental health and treating it, but the group participation stuff, and nobody bothered to say, hey, I attended that program and I never seen a single person. I don't know who facilitated it. There's a name on my paper, but that's all I got. But speaking on the retaliation aspect, we're actually partnered with the Texas Civil Rights Project. So what Texas COs and wardens need to understand that any act of retaliation will be documented and acted on in the lawsuit. It will be an example as to how crooked the system is. So if they want to go in and they want to tear up the cells and destroy legal paperwork, understand that will be brought to the public's attention, just like your policy violations, just like your procedures, your amendment violations. Everybody seemed to forget that even criminals get constitutional rights. And nowhere in the Constitution does it say that you are absolved of any of them once you commit a crime. I mean, let's be honest, a lot of people that wrote the Constitution were slave owners, so they still thought that people had a right to protest. And somehow we lost that.
Well, because they've slandered. I mean, listen, I'm not here to tell you that everybody in prison are a bunch of good dudes and they don't deserve to be in prison. I've been there. Mm-hmm. I've been around crud balls. I've been around piece of shit. I've been around some terrible individuals. But regardless, we're the United States of America. We have in our laws and our rules things that protect people. That we profess that we treat our citizens here in America with dignity. And we so quick to point our fingers at other countries that commit such atrocities on their populations and the people incarcerated in their facilities. But we do the same shit, but we're not when I say me, I mean the United States government, the state government. We do the same shit. But, the journalists, the news people, whatever, they're in cahoots with the government because they're not putting it out there. They're not broadcasting it. And it takes individuals like you, if you're just tuning in, I'm talking to Brittany. She's an advocate. She's out there working with the inmates out in Texas prison to try to reform the system. Because those people in the Texas prison are suffering inhumane conditions. They're stuck in cells for years on end without getting any fresh air, without getting any rec. The Geneva Convention, that these things that they wrote up at the end of the war guarantees us 3 hours, 3 times an hour, 3 times a week, minimum. Showers, minimum 3 times a week. My friend has been in a cell for over 2 years, and he's been out of his cell 4 times in the last 2 years. He has a cell phone. He shows me his cell, and his cell is smaller than my freaking bathroom that I have here. And I've been in those conditions. I protest in my own way, which is probably not, the right way. I assaulted a staff. I've been cell extracted. But, before I got to this point, I swallowed my pride. I bear, whatever. I overlook all the disrespect and the mistreatment. But like I said, it gets to a point where it gets too much that you don't have really control over your emotions and your anger anymore because it got you to that point. Like, I didn't want to do 8 extra years because I knocked out a guard. But that motherfucking piece of shit kept pushing until I said, fuck it. And when we went to court, he didn't tell me what he was doing. The only thing he said out of his mouth was, I was just trying to do my job. Like, through the course of my, I'm taking people on my journey through all the different penitentiaries that I've been to. And I'm now in Atwater USP. And in Atwater USP, I have two good friends of mine. And if you were to meet them, you would think they're one of the coolest individuals around. But they end up assaulting each of them ended up assaulting a staff member because, like I said, these fucking dudes that wear these uniforms and these badges, not all of them, but enough of them, just kept poking until they got their ass beat. But we can't win. We get the shit in the stick. We get charged. We get more time. We get thrown in the shoe, and we get beat up in the shoe by the staffs. Whatever else that goes on, the repercussion that comes from that. But never once, when they go to court, do they ever ask these staff, these COs, well, what the fuck were you doing poking at him all these fucking time?
Yep, and so I'm not sure if any of the viewers are familiar with the Stanford prison experiment that occurred in the 70s, but it was designed by a professor to examine the relationship between CO and inmate and the kind of psychological effects that both sets go through while they're interacting with each other. And they actually didn't make it more than a few days before they had to shut it down because the college students who were playing the part of the CO and the other college students who were playing the part of the inmate both started to experience symptoms. The COs became verbally and physically assaultive, and they started to make the inmates, they subjected them to more extreme incarceration, such as, down talking them, or, they ask when their food's ready, and you'll get your fucking food when I want. I'll dump it right out on the floor. You can eat it off of there. You're an animal. You know what I mean? And the inmates were experiencing anxiety and depression. And both these sets of people went in understanding it was fake. It was a study.
Yeah.
And they still deteriorated. So if that gives any inclination to how strong an individual has to be mentally just to be able to handle a short-term incarceration in these conditions, it should say something to the public that, the guards are abusive, and they're often suffering from PTSD just as much. You can you can have incarcerated individuals who also treat them with respect and understand that they are doing their job. And then you have other inmates who are suffering the mental health effects and they're self-mutilating. One guy wrote me and he's convinced he has a microchip in his eye. Now, I don't know if you guys know much about bloodborne pathogens or how long HIV or hepatitis live on the surface of anything, a countertop or a bar or a pair of handcuffs, for instance. But if that inmate decides to try to remove his quote-unquote chip that's in his eye and decides to throw his eyeball at a guard, and, you know, that guard's going to suffer the effects that were done, having to go get the blood test to make sure they weren't contaminated with any bloodborne pathogens, and walking past a cell every day and thinking, is this guy going to do the same thing? Or the men who catch cases for masturbation in front of guards, they decided to go ahead and take away any photographs that are even the slightest bit sexual. And when I say sexual, I don't mean nudes. I mean your wife in some lingerie that exposes no sexual organs whatsoever. No, nothing. They took that away from them. And what nobody bothered to do before deciding to take away that was understand that when you remove certain things from an individual's life, it causes hypersexuality. So not being able to look at his wife in lingerie and remember that he gets to go home to that, in his head, means that he should be able to do whatever he wants now. And if that includes jacking off on a guy, that's what he's going to do because he's not mentally fit. And people don't understand that you can only restrict an individual so far before it has that effect on them. And I actually read a book a couple years back called The Monster Factory. And the point of the book, everybody assumes I'm talking about men in prison are monsters, but it's actually how the prison creates them. Kind of like we talked about before, you know, a guy goes in for a low-level drug charge, he's now getting a strangulation case because of the frustration that built up, because he should have been called and told his mom was dead 3 months, or, the week it happened, not 3 months later. And it's so bad that I've gotten the family members in the free world to reach out to me because their loved one committed suicide in the unit and the warden is not telling them everything. So Texas has what's called a death in custody report. So anytime somebody dies in state custody within the TDCJ, they have to fill a report out online. And within that report, it talks about, of course, the individual, their crime for incarceration, but it also asks, did they exhibit any mental health effects? Did they threaten suicide? Did they commit or threaten to commit a staff assault or an assault on another inmate? Were they self-mutilating? Did they disclose any thoughts of suicide? All those answers on those death in custody reports say unknown. And they're unknown because they're short of staff. So understand that those 61 people who died from suicide within the Texas state prisons last year died by neglect. Okay, you are trusting these people to care for your loved one so that they can return home to you, but they keep getting their trays jacked because the dude on the run is threatening the CO that if he doesn't get his trays, he's going to hurt him, and he's going to hurt his family, or he knows who his wife is, or whatever. They don't understand that all that frustration and then not having anywhere to put it, no outlet, is one of the most unhealthy things you can do for a human.
Yeah. You know, I want to touch on, like, something that you comment earlier. Like, they have millions of dollars for these different programs that supposedly supposed to be going to inmates, but they're not. Mm-hmm. So if you as taxpayers, you know, whatever state you're in, on a federal level, state level, if you're a taxpayer, which if you have a job, if you buy a piece of gum, if you fill up your gas tank, you're a freaking taxpayer. The government is taking your money every time you try to spend it. You should feel some type of way about your money being stolen from you. Because the money is there, but it's not going to rehabilitating the prisoners, like they tell you. It's not going to the programs that they're telling you, but the money's there and it's being spent. And if it's not going to those programs, then let's start asking questions. Well, where the fuck is it going to?
Yeah.
You know, and we should feel,
The
yeah.
thing is, Abbott keeps borrowing from the prison budget. Now, here's something Representative Carl Sherman brought up during the Appropriations Committee meeting. The majority of Texas prisons are completely un-air conditioned. I know a lot of people in Texas know that, but not a lot of people nationwide. But one thing that they decided to do is repurpose one of the prisons for an ICE detainee camp. So what they did in that is they actually installed, so they moved the inmates out, installed temporary air conditioning for migrants. And then as soon as the migrants were gone, they took the air conditioning back. So if that says anything as to what your taxpayer dollars are going to, that it's not your family, it's not your loved one that's incarcerated to have air conditioning, but it's going for a migrant who's trying to make a way for themselves. And, you know, that's the death rate that occurs, all the autopsies the taxpayers have to pay for because people are dying from heat stroke. I mean, if you're not pro-inmate or pro-right, at least be pro, you should be getting what you paid for.
You know, but they don't ever tell us these things out here in the public. The one thing they tell you so that you can be disconnected with the people that's incarcerated is they always try to tell you, yeah, these guys are in here are very bad people. They're a bunch of rapists and child molesters. Well, I have my brand. I have, if you can see on my YouTube, it's called Man Time, and I'm trying to pass the message on to emphasize to the people we're not all fucked up. Now we have standards. Men like me, we don't violate kids, we don't violate women, and we don't tell on people. When we do something, we take accountability for it. So whether you give me 10 years, 20 years, or 100 years, we accept the consequences for our actions. So that in itself's got to be respected. Now, I got sentenced to 26 years in the federal prison. And I've been in some of the worst prison across the United States. And I survived those penitentiaries because I carried myself a certain way. But the COs, they don't want to recognize that I'm a person of integrity, that I'm a person of standards. All they see is that I'm a prisoner. I'm an inmate. So somehow, in their mind, I'm a lesser human being than they are, and they have the right to treat me with less respect, to strip me of all my dignity,
Yeah, what's weird is a lot of the COs that work in the restrictive housing pods, that work with the gang members, they will actually tell you, I like working this pod because they are respectful, because they don't let each other treat us any which way. If one of their dudes is acting up or causing a fuss or doing something they know he shouldn't be doing, he said he'll get him in line. I don't have to. He said he'll yell on the run, dude, knock it off. You're gonna fuck us off on rec, all of us. Quit it. And they do. They listen because there is that honor and respect and dignity. But it's the officers that come from GP that are trying to cover a ship that I hear some of the most abusive and racist stuff from. For instance, there was one man who was begging for medical treatment for 3 days. And this man has a distended stomach. So for people who don't know what that is, if you see the infomercials and people from Africa, the hungry children, how their stomachs bloated, that's what this individual was suffering. So he had an intestinal blockage that caused gas and liquids to build up in his stomach for 3 days. So he's begging to go to medical. The CO comes onto the wing with a 5-man team and says, yeah, I'll get medical down here, but before I do, if they tell me there's nothing wrong with you, I'm going to gas you right in your fucking face. Verbatim, what was said. And if you're sitting there and you are convinced you are about to die, you are in an unbelievable amount of pain. I don't know anybody who, if you suffer from chronic pain, you understand that some days are unbearable. Imagine being in a place where not only is your pain unbearable, but your surroundings, to the point where it's easier to end your life than to try to get a medical visit. And, you know, if anybody is American, then how can they think this is right or just or an acceptable way to treat people? Because you don't treat people like shit and expect them to come out good people. That's not how we work.
And you know, I don't have anything against animals. I love animals. You guys see my dog Wheezy. He's always trying to get on the screen with me, trying to take my shine. But I don't have anything against chicken. But you know, the chickens, they're raised to get put on our plate. But yet we have people that fight so adamantly about, you know, their condition, to be able to move around, to be able to breathe, to be able to have fresh air, free range chicken. You know, when I go to the grocery store now, I see the different labels on these eggs, poultry by free range chicken. So when did human beings, when did men and women become lesser than chicken? Why is not such an outcry over the mistreatment of human beings? Why? Because you guys deem us, you know, unredeemable, that we're a bunch of freaking screw-ups that don't deserve dignity, you know, don't deserve to be treated with dignity, don't be treated with respect. You know, and that's, you know, part of my podcast, part of my program that I'm trying to just emphasize is to give people a glimpse of what is really going on, and that there really are people in there that deserve to be treated with a certain level of courtesy and respect. They're doing their time. And I'm not speaking for everybody, but regardless of how crazy or how piece of shit these individuals are, if we're so hopeless, if you don't feel that we're deemed for society, I'd rather you kill us. Just put me in a chair, put me in the gas chamber or whatever, and snuff me out already, instead of fucking sitting there and having me suffer day after day for decades and decades and being mistreated. You know.
I wanted to ask you, was there any more questions that anybody else had? Because I got to hop off here in a little bit.
Yeah, they just come up and down, and I've been like, when you were talking, I was just letting them talk too. But yeah, I can, man, Brittany, if it's okay, I call you by that's your first name, Brittany, or I don't. They say okay. You know, I'm so appreciative of you and the work that you do, because us in here, we cannot. You know, when I speak, even though I'm home now, when I speak, I have that stigma of being an ex-con, of being a violent offender, of being a felon, or whatever else, a criminal, whatever else you want to label me. So with that stigma, a lot of people is not going to open their doors for me or not even hear what I have to say, because they feel that I don't have anything worth talking about. So it takes you and people like you and other people out there that are from a respectable occupation, that are pillars of the community, to speak on these things. And, you know, on behalf of everybody, of all the prisoners, of all the inmates, of everybody that's incarcerated, man, we thank you so much from the bottom of our heart, because we're in a hopeless situation. And there's no way for us to get our voice heard without individuals like you. And I appreciate you. I appreciate all the work you've done. And for you here today, taking the time to come on here and sharing the things that's been going on in these correctional facilities, not just in Texas, but all across the United States of America. You know?
Yeah, no, you're welcome. I guess if I had to leave anybody with a thought, it would be, you know, as you yourself, you were a free man. You've done your time. You are no different from me anymore. Like, I was not on that jury, nor am I your God. I have no right to judge. So for everybody who still thinks it's just and right to treat people as animals, I just want to say, just keep your eyes open, because those people who are mistreated will be living on your street one day. And before it becomes an issue for you personally, it needs to become an issue for everybody overall to change it and to make things better. I guess if I had to leave them with that thought, that'd be it.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it gratefully.
You're welcome.
Okay, you have a great
You're
day.
welcome. You too.
Okay, bye-bye. Bye. You know, I was speaking to Brittany. She's an advocate for people that's incarcerated. You know, for the purpose of this program today. And I'm sorry I didn't get to say hi to everybody that tuned in. You know, shout out to DC, Chi-Town, Puerto Rico, you know, the homies out of West Valley, Utah, everybody that's tuned in and left comments, man. I appreciate you viewing. And like I said, I'm not just out here just trying to entertain you. I really feel real passionate about the cause that I'm trying to venture into. But you know, like I was just telling her on the phone, when I approach people and try to tell them and share them the experience that I've had, like these people in these professions, they're not really trying to hear anything that I got to say, because I've been labeled, I've been stigmatized that I'm just a criminal, just another violent offender, and really, they don't really hear whatever I got to say, it ain't worth their time. So I would appreciate, like, you viewers, like right now in Texas Correctional Facility, for the first time in its history, all the gangs, all the families, all the inmates throughout those facilities out there in Texas are coming together to put a demonstration down, a peaceful demonstration that is afforded by the Constitution, that is their right to be able to peacefully protest the atrocity that's been going on down there in Texas. These dudes are in their cells for years, months and months, without ever getting a chance to come out, get some fresh air, walk around. They're not even be able to shower. Like, I know to you guys that's never been locked up, you might feel like, oh, what's the big deal? Man, it's a freaking big deal. It's a big deal for your psyche. It's a big deal for your physical health. It's a big deal emotionally. You know, how many times you guys out here have to try to find some space to decompress, to get away from everything and to get your mind back. We're stuck in a freaking cell 24/7 with no outlet. So like she was saying, like, no, people aren't concerned because their family members aren't incarcerated or they themselves never experienced that. But these people that we locked up and throw away and don't feel like it's redeemable, some of them are returning back home. You know, when they're living next door to you, would you rather have somebody that was able to afford the program? Now, these programs, they tell you in the legislation, they tell you, if you look at it, that it's there. That, oh, we have this program for this inmates. We have this, we have that, we have that. Well, I'm here to tell you from firsthand experience, they ain't got shit. They're not doing a fucking thing but putting that shit on paper and getting your tax dollars to pay for it. So if you're a citizen that's paying taxes, don't you want to question where all that money is going? Don't you want to know who the fuck is getting rich off these prison program that is supposed to be set up to help these prisoners, to help rehabilitate them, to help educate them? Don't you want to know where all this fucking money is going? Because it's not going to that program. And it's not going to these individuals that need it. So now, you're going to cry when a motherfucker come home and he living next door to you and he spaz out because he's suffering from PTSD because of the conditions that he's been in for the last 2 decades. You know, I get adamant about these things because I've experienced these things firsthand. You know, I'm not out here to promote that I'm some type of motherfucking gangster, that I'm hardcore, that I'm whatever it is. You know, when I speak, I'm not speaking for myself. I'm speaking on behalf of the individuals like me, whether it's men or women, that's out there in the struggle right now, that's suffering under the oppression that we call the federal prison system or the state prison system. I don't know what it is that I can say. I maybe lack the vocabulary to articulate my emotions and my feelings about this subject. But for you viewers, you tuning in, you follow my episodes, and you see the conditions that we've been in. You see that we're not in there just watching TV and playing video games. We're literally in a motherfucking war zone. You got dudes that was in there during the earthquake in California that are claiming PTSD for something that happened for 30 freaking seconds. So imagine you being in prison for decades. These specialists, they tell you somebody that's been incarcerated for 6 months suffer from PTSD, suffer from trauma, and all the other psychological effects that goes on with that shit. So imagine somebody that spent 2 decades in there. Imagine what's going on here in their head. What's up, Shaq Gravy, man? Big dogs. Man, I appreciate you guys always tuning in and commenting. And like I said, forgive me if I get too emotional and too animate and angry about this motherfucking subject. But man, this is personal to me. I grew up in a penitentiary. I really did. Since I was 16 years old, I've been locked up. And I just did a 24-year stretch in some of the most violent environment that these federal facilities have to offer. And the only reason I'm here and the only reason that I have, my sanity left is because I've had a strong support system from my wife, my family, my friends. But a lot of my friends in there incarcerated don't have that same support. They're there fending for themselves. And man, I don't know how I'm going to go about this prison reform shit. Like real prison reform shit. Not shit that just looks good on paper. Not shit that makes these politicians feel good about themselves or the public feel good that, they're supporting some cause so now they can sleep at night thinking that they did something. But real shit. The shit that needs to be overseen and implemented in the penitentiaries. Because I'm telling you right now, the system is set up to dummy you down and to throw you away and to forget about you. They tell you when you come in that they encourage strong family ties. They encourage you to communicate with your family, to see your family. But every single time they have an opportunity, they strip all those things away from you. If you're in the county jail, fighting your case, tell me, why the fuck does it cost you $7 a minute to call your family? The people that are incarcerated, they're committing crimes. Why? Because they were poor. They come from a lower income community. So how the fuck are they going to afford $5, $7 a minute phone calls to communicate with their family? It's exploitation. It's extortion at its finest. And they're doing it with the stamp of the law. These motherfuckers don't give a fuck about us. We're a cash cow. So that's why my message is to all them big homies running around the streets. Stop making your fucking young homies a statistic. Stop feeding the machine. Stop getting our good people, our good soldiers locked up. Let's redirect their energy. Let's do something that's productive for themselves, for their family, and an extension for their community. Harness the heart that's in the street. Cultivate it and turn it into something positive instead of throwing it a fucking way for crumbs. That's my message, man. I've taken up enough of your time. I appreciate all the individuals that showed up, that left comment. I'm sorry I couldn't reply while I was talking to Brittany, but this program, I just want to bring attention to you that the inmates out there in Texas prisons is organizing a lay down, a food strike, because they just got tired of it. This is the first time in history, because if you know, like the people that commented that was from Texas, that the reason they created SEGs because of the war between the Texas Syndicate and the Texas inmate. Well, those gangs are no longer at war, but they're still being locked in SEG, admin SEG, 24/7 lockdown. When they come through, it doesn't matter if they committed an infraction, they broke any rules, if they've done anything wrong, they're automatically thrown in there automatically. And they're tired of it. We should be tired of it. We as a public, because now I'm part of the public, we as a public, as a community should be tired of it, because those conditions create monsters. Some people go in there and they're half decent human beings, but when they're in there suffering these conditions, being mistreated, they get angry, they get frustrated, and they become monsters. They become unfit for society. They weren't before, but they are now when they're coming out, because of the conditions they've been living in for years and years and years. Nick Couch, man, I don't care you at low med or USP, you feel pissed, test or some BS write up, they take your visit, your phone, yeah, through all the system. Listen, it's not, let's like he said, it's not just the USP, it's through every facility that you've been into. They don't help you try to come home. They don't help prepare you to come home and be a part of the community. Why? Because we are a cash cow to the system. They say they have programs that are fighting against recidivism. I think that's the word, like repeated offenders. But that's not what they want. That's not their object. That's not their real goal. Their real goal is to dummy you down, get you so fucked up, limit your access to any type of resources, so that when you come out, you fall right back into your old pattern and go back in and make them more money. Every penitentiary, I don't care if it's a state prison, a federal prison, or privately owned prison, they are a freaking corporation that makes money off of us. So again, you know, maybe some of you big homies might not like the shit that I'm spilling here, but people that's been incarcerated with me, that's been down with me, everywhere with me, yeah, I'm that motherfucker too. And if you ain't helping your homies in a positive way, if you leading your homies to the grave, if you leading your homies to be a statistic, if you feed this machine, man, fuck you. And that's how I'm going to leave it. Welcome to the USP. Much love and respect to everybody that viewed me, man. Thank you for your support. Love you guys. Thank you, Brittany Robinson, for joining us. You know, reach out to them. Anybody that's out there in Texas, man, contact your freaking representative and tell them, man, you tired of this shit. We all need to be tired of this shit. I'm tired of this shit. Thank you. Love you. Much love, Florida, D.C., Chicago, Puerto Rico, West Valley, Utah, Billy Leon from Provo. Man, see you guys next time, man. Thank you for joining me. Bye.